All right, welcome back to Modern Nurse Podcast. So excited. Season 3 is about plant medicine, and we're just diving into this because we want more nurses to learn about this type of modality because it's so important. I have a very special guest, Dr. Codi Peterson. He is a pediatric pharmacist and also a cannabis science communicator. Cody, welcome to the show. Just so stoked to have you here today, man.
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me. I'm gonna have to up my energy level. You're to match yours. You're doing great. I'm excited to listen to this podcast.
Yes. Awesome, Cody. Tell us about yourself, man. So I know about you, but a lot of people don't. And you have such a great advocacy, and you also have such a great part in educating just the human race on cannabis and then the cannabinoid system in itself. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I mean, by night, I'm a pediatric pharmacist. I work 7 days on, 7 days off in a hospital. You can see I'm scrubbed up right now. I'm going after, I'm he piecing out after this. So that's what I do by night. And by day, because I didn't have enough to do, I decided to start this endeavor into cannabis, which really took off in the 2020, 2019, when I learned about the University of Maryland Medical Cannabis Science master's degree. So, as a pharmacist who's always had an affinity for this particular plant, I was very interested when my friend who lived in the DC metro called me, said he saw this billboard and couldn't think of anyone else. So, lo and behold, with a little bit of luck, and a little bit of support even from my employer, I was able to go back to school and get my master's degree. When I did that, the way it all transpired is I decided that I couldn't just keep this to myself. This information is just so extraordinary. It's insane that I wasn't taught it in pharmacy school. I was never taught anything about cannabis, marijuana, THC, CBD, or anything of the sorts, including the master cellular communication system that exists in all vertebrate on planet Earth, the birds, the fish, the rodents, all of us have an endocannabinoid system. It wasn't even mentioned. Nobody brought it up in physiology, biology, chemistry, and it's crap. And so I was tired of that. And, I said, okay, I guess somebody has to get out there and do it. And so that's what I'm doing.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that. And it's so common. I feel like amongst all of us that are in that realm of being like, fuck the system, I'm going to go and spread the wonderful words of what cannabis can do for people. Very similarly, I was teaching at Emory University in the mental health nursing area and was basically outed for talking about cannabis and psychedelics because they're like, you have no right to be talking about this. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, I didn't just get off 8 meds like several years ago using cannabis? Okay, right. So it's
I
really
don't have a degree in
right.
nursing or
So,
any just lived experience. Like, oh, you get
yeah,
to knowledge gate who
yeah,
can talk about a plant that has existed for, well, millions of years and been used by
yeah,
humans for tens of thousands of years. Like, no, that doesn't make sense.
yeah,
But that's the stigma.
yeah,
That's the system like really dragging its feet to catch up. But I will say, I do feel like there's a bit of a wave. Like there is this uprising, heading towards like a little more open-mindedness to integration. And
yeah.
so I'll give you an example. Again, I'm a pediatric pharmacist. I work in a hospital, like very much traditional medicine, and I see it for both the amazing life-saving work we do in the emergency department and the relatively poor job we do around diet, lifestyle, exercise, and alternative everything, acupuncture, chiropractic, whatever modality you're talking about. Like we have this really indoctrinated or really one single-minded system, and it's focused on the way it works, and it's like a machine that is for profits as opposed to really like integrating and holistically approaching our patients as an N of one, so to speak. So
Yeah.
I want to just say both. Do I have my beef with modern healthcare? I do, but also I literally see lives saved regularly with modern medicine too. So it's like you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but what we do need to do is figure out a way to untether profitability from outcomes or profitability from, people's healths and livelihood. But I don't have a solution for that.
Yeah.
However, I am excited to see a little bit of change and progress. So an example is my employer in Southern California is actually working to implement Ryan's Law. And in California is the first state to adopt Ryan's Law. Ryan was a California resident at the end of his life dealing with cancer. And what ended up happening is he was using medical cannabis at home. He had a doctor's recommendation, all of the things. And when he went to his healthcare facility to get care, they refused to allow him to use medical cannabis products. Even an oral tincture, he's not smoking in the boys' room. He's he's using a medical product, and they refused to let him. So he ended up leaving and moving to Oregon, or finishing his life in Oregon due to his terminal illness. But his father, who happened to be a pretty savvy lawyer, went out and sort of crafted this law, and it ended up passing in California. So, in essence, a terminally ill patient with a doctor's recommendation for medical cannabis using a non-inhalable product, you are allowed. And what's even cooler is a new iteration, building on that law, actually changed the rules a little bit more and has carved out not just terminally ill, but a older person over 65 with a chronic medical condition, i.e., all of them, not all of them,
Yeah,
most of
most of
them,
them, yeah.
should be allowed in certain healthcare institutions, like a long-term care facility, allowed to use their medical cannabis gummies or their CBD or hemp gummies. Like that should be allowed, and it should be documented in the medical record, et cetera. So, all of that to say, we've done an okay job. We're trying to figure out how good places are doing. I'm working on a survey right now to push out to healthcare institutions to understand how they're implementing this. But my personal institution is rapidly integrating this, and we are going to and are currently basically like streamlining how to allow patients to use plant medicine while in the hospital. And so
Wow.
this is happening, and good news in Washington State, it just went for a vote. It's going to the House of Representatives there. The same idea. Hawaii's proposed it before and it got turned down. There's numerous states. Michigan's talking about it. So this is starting to creep into modern health care, and I think it's great. And this is always evolving. For context, it used to be in places where your mental health background, right? So alcoholism is one of the diseases or conditions in which you were taken care of. There, I remember being trained, and look, it's not that long ago. I graduated pharmacy school in 2013. I remember being trained in a pharmacy, and we were keeping beer in the lock room downstairs. And the patients who had an alcohol use disorder could order a beer with their dinner. Okay, like it's not that insane to think that they can use a cannabis product, which is a far safer and more utilitarian, more uses than alcohol, to be integrated into healthcare. And so that's what I hope continues to happen, is that we can not tear down the system. Although if that's what you want, go for it. I just don't think that that's the right solution forward. I think that we need to build and integrate what we can into modern healthcare, and that's going to more rapidly help more people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, because it's the integration because some people will be on traditional medication and they do want to supplement, with cannabis. So I love the marriage of the not the marriage, but the integration
Yeah,
of these.
the
Yeah.
mending together, right? And allowing both to exist and to improve the efficacy or safety of the other by using another. So, an example would be, okay, if you have atrial fibrillation, you're at a high risk of throwing a clot to your brain. Cannabis can't fix that. I'm sorry, at least not by any understanding that we have right now. And so it doesn't work, right? And so you can't just everything be this, like we don't even have a good plant medicine that's this really effective anticoagulant that we've done. So you can't just tear down everything that we've built and learned. But what we can do is we can take what we know about cannabis, find where it fits in safely into modern medicine, and that will really help people, as opposed to just the privileged people who have access to someone with wherewithal, or somebody who listens to cool music and happens to be a hookup. Right here in Georgia, it's illegal to get your hands on a marijuana product unless you're going to a dispensary that has a limit on THC of 5%. Right? So any marijuana product in California would be totally illegal in Georgia. Right? So that's a privilege that Californians have that Georgians do not. Then it gets even worse when you start to look at socioeconomic scales, right? So, Steph, one of my mentors in Americans for Safe Access, of which I sit on the board, is, you know, if we stopped right now, the organization would have to be renamed Safe Safe blah, 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 Privileged Americans for Safe Access.
Wow.
Like we aren't at that point yet where it's an equal playing field, right? If you're poor, cannabis is relatively affordable in the modern economy, but like you don't get that luxury, right? And that's not the case with medicine. If you're poor, you still should, in general, get access to medicine. And so we need to find a better balance. I'm not saying I think insurers need to be expanded. Like I don't have all the solutions. I just know that we see these problems. We have a ways to go still.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you make a great point. The access points, the socioeconomic, it has a huge component in the access of cannabis and how they can use it. So thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to talk about the endocannabinoid system because
Hmm.
it's so amazing. And all of the previous guests have just dabbled into this, but I know this is like your baby and you can talk about it. So what would you want? Let's focus on just nurses. Like, how can give us some education like that I can share with my patients so they can understand this a little bit better.
Yeah, totally. So it's hard because it's something you've never really heard about. And when you hear the word system, you think of an organ system, your nervous system, your cardiovascular system, right? And those are organ systems, systems made up of multiple different pieces to complete one sort of functional role in the body. The difference here is the endocannabinoid system is not a organ system. It is a cellular communication system. So the nervous system, it is the most abundant receptor or like satellite dish for receiving messages in the entire nervous system, 4 times more than dopamine, which you hear about all the time. And so there's this immense amount of CB1 receptors, part of the endocannabinoid system there. If you look at the immune system, the CB2 receptors, the ECS is generally defined as CB1 receptors and CB2 receptors. CB1, I just mentioned, are in the brain. CB2 are vastly distributed throughout almost every single immune cell in the body, whether it's the glial cells, the immune cells of the brain, the white blood cells that attack the bacteria in our body, or the memory cells that help us recognize former things. The endocannabinoid system is part of the cellular communication, telling those cells to attack, reproduce, turn off, and go die. It's like this whole thing is regulated. Now, this is not acting alone, it's acting in concert with all those other organ systems and all those other neurotransmitters which you've heard of. It modulates dopamine. It affects your adrenaline and noradrenaline. It plays in the serotonin system and in the acetylcholine system. And we can talk about how those all play. Dopamine, think addiction reward feels good. Motivation, right? The people who consume a lot of cannabis, one of the older tropes, and there's probably some truth to it, is anhedonia and like the lazy stoner, right? You don't want to do anything but sit around and smoke weed. That's dopamine. Okay. Serotonin. Some people have very profound experiences. Some people argue it's a psychedelic. The serotonin system is what regulates psychedelic effects, and it's likely part of this playing in the cannabis, the psychedelia effect. Of course, it's a big conversation we don't have time for. Adrenaline and noradrenaline, your fight or flight system. This is tachycardia when you smoke THC. You can't get away from it. Now, the seasoned user doesn't even notice anymore that their heart rate has jumped up a little, but the novice user knows that it feels like their heart is beating out of their chest. Also, anxiety, paranoia, that's part of your fight or flight response. That's adrenaline and noradrenaline. What else did I say? Acetylcholine. This is involved in creating all your secretions, your eyes, your ear, your belly, your bowels. Your mouth is dry. That's the acetylcholine. So the reason it does all of these things, not just one, is because it's a master communication system within your body, and it's evolutionarily preserved over the last 600 million years. And so it's not the oldest neurotransmitter. We know serotonin is actually older than this, for example, but it goes back to, I mean, we're talking about some of the earliest eukaryotes, the cells that went from being monocellular, like bacteria, to multicellular living organisms like sea anemones or little fishies or, anything that started to become more complicated than one cell. The cells had to talk to one another. Okay, so as soon as life burst into this complex organism made up of multiple cells, it had to be able to talk cell to cell. Well, what's on the outside of every cell in a eukaryote? You remember your bio class?
Cell membrane?
Cell membrane made of fats. And that's the key to the endocannabinoid system. It runs on fats. The fats you intake in your diet are what make up the words that the endocannabinoid system is able to speak. And it uses those fats to create the signal to talk to their neighbor and tell it, hey, ramp things up or chill things out or pass this message along. It uses fats that are on the exterior to send to their neighbor, which makes total sense when you think about it. This is different than traditional neurotransmitters like serotonin or dopamine, which are water soluble, stored inside the cell, have to be forced out of the cell, and then they have to react with a receptor nearby. These fats do something similar, but it's already right there at the outside of the cell. The cell doesn't have to work to send that signal. It's just a super dynamic system. It's ubiquitous in almost all multicellular creatures, from, like I already mentioned this, dogs, birds, cats, lizards, everything you can imagine, but also some invertebrates too. Leeches, for example. Most insects are not thought to have an endocannabinoid system, but actually, as we learn more, it turns out that there's some really cool stuff going on. Do you want to hear that?
Yeah, yeah. Let's.
Okay, really recent study out of China, I think 2024. They looked at bees. Bees are insects. They don't have cannabinoid receptors or the cellular machinery to create endocannabinoids. So ECSs are present in basically every animal on Earth except insects. Bees is what we're looking at. Okay, so they looked at these bees and they're like, well, they do have, or sorry, they don't have any receptors, the CB1, CB2, but they do have some of these other things that might interact with cannabinoids as well, called TRP channels. Okay, so they're like, okay, that's interesting, but they can't produce endocannabinoids, so there would be no reason for that. Well, what they did is they went and looked at the organisms in the belly of the insects. Yes, they looked at the microbiome of the bees. And what they did is they watched as the bees ate pollen, because we think of pollen as just something they collect and take back, but actually pollen is rich in nutrients, both protein and fat. And so the bees eat pollen. In there is fats. The microbiome of the bees creates endocannabinoids, because the bees can't create endocannabinoids from the fats. And then those endocannabinoids interact with these weird other receptors I mentioned to induce reward and learning behavior. So bees learn faster when they're producing endocannabinoids through their microbiome. And this just came out. You can Google it, bees endocannabinoid system and reward. But like the way we're understanding this system just expands more and more and more. You want
That.
another wow? Can I give you one more
Yes,
wow?
just keep going with it, man. I'm loving this.
So I told you that the endocannabinoid system is CB1 and CB2 receptors.
Yeah.
Okay. In addition to that, that's just the satellite dishes to receive the signals. We need to be able to signals themselves. So typically we talk about this anandamide, the bliss molecule, and 2-AG, which is just another one we found second. Think of it as the second one we found, 2-AG. Okay. It doesn't get a cool name. No one ever remembers it, but it's actually hella important, probably more important than anandamide. Anyway, so those are the receptors. And then the cells have machinery that I kind of mentioned. The bees don't have it naturally. It's the organism in their gut, but you have it and I have it and the mice have it and the fish have it, blah, blah, blah. The cellular machinery to take a fat from the cellular membrane and produce a signal known as an endocannabinoid. Okay, cool. That's the endocannabinoid system as we understand it in 1995. Now, I kind of mentioned with the bees, we've actually expanded that definition to numerous more signals. The body doesn't just make two signals, it can make 30. The body doesn't have just two satellite dishes to receive these messages, it's probably got 30 of those too. And the cellular machinery is more than just those one. The two traditional, there's probably multiple. We're still figuring it all out. Okay, so this system just got a lot bigger. Okay. Cool thing we did. We knew the system was growing, and what they did is they looked at bears in Scandinavia, brown bears that hibernate. So what they did is they watched these bears. They took muscle and fat samples in the summertime and in the wintertime during hibernation. And they looked at the endocannabinoid system's levels, the tone of the system. And what they saw was a dramatically different tone in the summer than the winter. In the summer, they were cranking out a lot of endocannabinoids. And if you think like, if the endocannabinoids act like THC, in the summertime, what's the bear gonna do? Hum, hum, hum. And he doesn't feel full. He just wants to keep eating and going. There is no satiation, right? So the bears get the munchies in the summer. And then we see a dramatic drop in those same endocannabinoids and a dramatic rise in something we haven't talked about yet, but what endocannabinoid like molecule known as OEA. We don't have time. You can check out some of my content or lectures. You can learn about this. But we saw dramatically different levels of OEA in bears, and we think that that's how they're preserving their bones while they don't get up all winter, how they're slowing down their belly, they don't poop all winter, how they change their body's ability to reabsorb liquid and urine. It's insane. All that to say, all of that to say, the endocannabinoid system has recently been discovered to be involved in hibernation, and me, as an animal documentary junkie, went looking. No one has even covered this in an animal like it's not even talked about in documentaries about animals yet. But this is intrinsic to the hibernation of bears and really all mammals. They also did a study on squirrels and marmots that we saw similar comparable results. So hibernation, this amazing evolutionary adaptation that if you watch the documentaries will be like, and nature's mystery. You know, it's the endocannabinoid system. It's the same system that THC is influencing when we take that plant and we consume it. It interacts with that internal system that is shared by all life on Earth, all animals on
Yes. Holy shit, you just blew my mind, man.
Earth.
That is just it. I'm just like, I can't even, I'm like thinking of all the things now and just trying to put it all together because that is such
It's
a
complicated too. I know people are listening. They're like, wait, so what is he saying? Look, we don't know a tenth, a billionth of what we could learn about this insanely complex system. I told you, like, we learned about it starting in the 90s, which is recent. We originally thought it was two, two, and two, right? Which, if you take two to the six, like, the number's not immeasurable.
Yeah.
But now, when you got 10, 30, and 6, and you find a way to make the number, it's a insanely complex large number of how many different things that might be going on has to be measured, have to be accounted for. And so we really are just scratching the surface of this system, and you can't learn it all in this podcast. I'm sorry to tell you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, where can people find you like and learn more? Just like let's input that now before so people
Yeah,
don't
so
even know.
I'm most prolific in my content on LinkedIn. That is an everyday. I'm an everyday consistent guy. I'm not on Instagram as much. I don't like the algorithm quite the same, and the reward I get from Instagram is a different thing. It's not. I don't post as much. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
So on LinkedIn, it's my name, Codi Peterson. You see it on the bottom of the screen there. But in on Instagram and TikTok, I am Cannabis PharmD. So that's your favorite flower, followed by PharmD, PharmD. So that's my doctor of pharmacy. So that's where you can check me out on most of the platforms. I hope you connect with me. We also have a website. I'm part of the advisory team for the website The Canigma. So that's canigma.com, CANNIGMA.com. If you want to learn about this, I wrote an article about the endocannabinoid system. I've reviewed articles about 2AG. Like you can learn about all this stuff that I'm talking about at that website as well. And I think I gave it to you to share in the comments below.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll definitely drop it in the description below. And yeah, I mean, just such a plethora of information, and there's so much information, and it's so rich that it's going to take a minute for people
Mhm.
to be like, oh my God, I truly understand this. And I think that's where self-advocacy and self-teaching is huge because we're taught sometimes one way, but we want to include other modalities into our current formats of care that we're receiving from like traditional doctors or subscribers, or prescribers, because it becomes a subscription if you're not careful. But just briefly before we get off, I just want to highlight on the pediatric, because you're a pediatric pharmacist. So do you see cannabis being used with pediatric patients, and what has been your experience with that?
Great question. So, absolutely, children with cancer, children with epilepsy, children with cerebral palsy, chronic challenges. Absolutely, I've seen medical benefit. Now, it hasn't totally integrated into healthcare, but there are many patients deriving benefit. There are patients who they're not successful too. They had side effects or didn't do anything. I've seen both. So that is overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a pediatric pharmacist. I didn't tell you this. I'm an emergency department pharmacist.
Okay.
So I don't see a lot of those benefits. Those are more on the hem-onc floors or the epilepsy floors. And we don't have a cannabis treatment sort of in the ED to break your seizure. We still use benzodiazepines, to break that, whether it's diazepam or lorazepam. Now, I do see something in the ER that I need to mention, and that is something known as cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. And this is not common. I don't want to be alarmist about it, but there are plenty of cases. Probably I see one a week, I would say. I definitely saw one this week of a patient who has been consuming cannabis for multiple years. They are otherwise healthy. Maybe they have some depression, anxiety, whatever, but they GI bodily, very healthy, neurocognitively, very healthy. Uh, and they've developed a weird vomiting condition. They come into the ER typically with nausea and vomiting lasting more than a day, cannot stop vomiting no matter what they do at home. They can't keep food down, they can't keep water down, and they don't feel right. And so they come to the ER and oftentimes don't even endorse cannabis, right? So that is like me giving you some insight. But patients will show up with the vomiting, they come to the ER, they get a full workup, they do a scan of the belly, they do a CT scan, they do the full workup head to toe looking for a reason and anything that could be causing this, and they don't find anything. And oftentimes, this patient just goes home with a diagnosis of maybe like gastroenteritis, inflammation of the stomach, or food poisoning, or something unexplainable, and the patient goes home. And then they just go back to their routine. They're smoking cannabis, they're using it usually every day. Um, I actually have to take a time out. I wanted people to know that I'm doing a survey. I did a survey on this exact topic, and I'm going to cite some numbers here from that survey. It's published in a week. So definitely check it out. You can Google my name and CHS. Hopefully, it'll come up on PubMed. Um, Anyway, so patients are you in our survey of adults, not children. In our survey that we're about to publish, we found that 75% of people were smoking 5 or more times a day, right? And so like these patients are typically consuming all day long. Okay, so that's just some context for numbers. Now, these patients go back. They didn't get diagnosed with anything in the ED. They go back to their routine. They kind of go through their life. Maybe they're not feeling like very good, but they're not vomiting. They're just like kind of just feeling crappy in the morning and having constipation or diarrhea or heartburn, GI things. And then weeks later, months later, with no other changes, they vomit again. And now they come back to the emergency department. We do another workup. People are starting to like be like, okay, what's going on? Maybe they endorse cannabis this time, and then they're diagnosed. Overwhelmingly, most patients come to the ER more than once before they get this diagnosis. There's a lot of concerns out there that doctors are just slapping this label on people. I think that's a fair concern, and it's probably true some of the time. But I assure you, as someone critically worried about this and closely looking at every patient who gets CHS, it is happening. And I've seen some wrong diagnosis too, but it's definitely happening. And I do the whole workup personally. I go interview the patient and I talk to them about their cannabis use. And this condition, CHS, which was once considered extremely rare, is probably scratched through extremely and just keep it at rare for now. Okay. Now, what the hell is this? What do you think of when you think of cannabis and nausea?
I don't know. I don't
It's
know.
good for nausea,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
It's FDA
I've taken
approved for nausea and
I've taken
vomiting.
it for nausea.
F Yeah, totally. FDA approved. We approved Marinol,
Yeah,
the synthetically made THC for chemo-induced nausea vomiting 40 years ago, 30 years ago.
yeah,
Long time. Okay, so marijuana is supposed to be good for nausea vomiting. What's going on here?
yeah,
Okay, well, like I mentioned, these individuals are consuming long term, many years, and they're consuming frequently, multiple days, and typically high THC cannabis, right? In Georgia, it might be 5% max, but I'm telling you over here, everything's 25.
yeah. You got like the
Or if it's not a vape, yeah.
yeah.
And so we have this chronic exposure to THC, and what we now believe is happening, and this is still a theory, not proven, is that this chronic exposure is dysregulating the endocannabinoid system, this master regulatory system distributed throughout the entire body, including the brain and the bowel. THC changes the way your bowels move. It changes your hunger signals. It's doing all sorts of stuff throughout the GI tract. And remember, the microbiome is integrated and blended into this too, just like we learned about the honeybees.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, my point is CHS is real. It's my research topic. I feel for these patients because often they're deriving medical benefit, or at least started with cannabis, deriving tremendous medical benefit from it. And now it's sort of turned on them, which can be really hard for patients. And, in the industry, the cannabis industry, which maybe isn't the best term, but the cannabis ecosystem, there's a lot of pushback saying that this is propaganda, that this is big alcohol, that it's lies, it's propaganda, blah blah blah. It's Reefer Madness 3.0, whatever you want to choose. There's a lot of pushback, and I get, I push back on that, and because I do see children. I'm not talking about even adults. I'm talking about under 19s that are developing a vomiting condition after consuming for just a few years, and we got to figure out what it is now. Theories, including the ECS dysregulation, have not been proven, and the counter theory within the industry is pesticides. We know, according to numerous reports and plenty of evidence, that the cannabis supply chain is not as clean as we'd like it to be. There are numerous contaminants, whether it's neem oil, which is a natural product from a tree natural to indigenous to India, or whether it's synthetic pesticides, sort of big ag modern things. We know that these things have infiltrated the cannabis supply chain. And so I get people's skepticism there, but we're talking about hundreds of pesticides. And we know you're going to get different bugs and use different treatments from farm to farm, from location to location. And we surveyed these 1,100 people and we looked at them state to state. We saw no differences in we asked them, where do you get your weed? Is it the dispensary? Is it your plug? Or is it the online market? Or is it I gave one other option. I can't remember. Oh, home grow. And so all of those were represented. Home grow and hemp were low. Legal weed was the most common place that people are getting sick from CHS, but also from the black market weed too. And you can't convince me that everybody from all those different sources are using the same pesticide and getting the same symptoms. We saw no difference in symptoms reported across those categories. And so there's something going on here, and it's not that much of a stretch. If you listen to the first part of this podcast, you understand this master homeostatic regulatory system that is there to act like a buoy in the ocean. Life on Earth is wavy. We are getting jerked around, right? You're hot, you're cold, you're bruised, you're injured, you're tired, and the ACS is always keeping us up. But for some people, we believe there is a genetic component. Ethan Russo, who's a preeminent cannabis scientist, says this as well. It's not pesticides. It's this buoy of the ECS getting inundated for so long that some people with certain genetics can't tolerate it. The buoy falls over, and these are these episodes. And all these episodes, when the buoy falls over, is called a hyperemetic episode. So that's vomiting a lot episode, right? And they can last days. In fact, we did the survey. For men, 1 to 2 days was common for the episodes. For women, we're talking about 3 to 5 days, with 10% of women experiencing episodes greater than 10 days. That's no eating, no drinking. You can't tolerate anything. You're just vomiting. It creates life-threatening consequences. And there have been deaths reported with CHS, both from the medicine we've tried to treat them with. That's like kind of on healthcare too, but plenty online of people getting renal failure, getting liver injuries to their body because they're so dehydrated from the vomiting. It's not the THC directly killing them. No, that's not what's happening. It's this cannabis use disorder overlapping with a vomiting condition that they may or may not believe that we don't have a good medical solution for. The system sucks. The ER wants to slap you with a label and tell you, oh, you earned this, right? Like puts you in a corner. Oh, you're weed addict. Go in the corner and vomit. So there's plenty of issues. I'm not saying healthcare's got it right, but this is real. I see it personally, and I want to help people understand it better. So all of that said, the survey is going to be published next week, probably at the same time of this podcast. It's my very first publication as the lead author, and I'm super excited about it. It'll be in Cannabis and Cannabinoid Research. And it's open access. So anyone who's listening to this podcast, I hope, don't quote me on that, but I think, and so it should be able and accessible to everyone. If it's not, by some crazy thing, you listen to this podcast, you look it up, it's not available, you message me and I will send you that paper.
Yes. Oh my God. Congratulations. That is definitely that's making history. I mean, it's really
Well, we
amazing.
need the information out there. People need to know. Another thing that they don't know and is dramatically underreported in the literature is called the prodrome. So I talked about the hyperemetic phase.
Yeah.
Those episodes last a few days. And then people go through, depending on if they quit or if, how their life is going, if they're under stress, all these things, they go through what's called a recovery phase, but then they usually re-enter what's called the prodromal phase. The prodromal means the before the syndrome. So if the hyperemetic episode is the syndrome, the prodromal phase is what's leading up to that. This is extremely common. It's something like 80% of our participants said they had this. It's almost not noted in the literature. And this is a warning signal for the body. We see patients waking up in the morning time, overwhelmingly, not overwhelmingly, 75% in the morning time, waking up with tummy grumbles, with heartburn, indigestion, feeling just really, I don't know what's wrong with me. And this is not normal for them. So what that is it's the endocannabinoid system, that dysregulation is facilitating itself in the morning because of our circadian rhythm. And so we see a lot of these patients just getting these low level GI symptoms for long periods, months, or even like many months to years of like, I just don't feel right. And they smoke cannabis. And usually, sometimes, we kind of asked about this as well. It's like 25% said it always makes it better. 25% said makes it sometimes make it better. 25% said it rarely makes it better. And 25% said that never makes it better.
Wow.
So cannabis is helping our nausea-ish. It's kind of like keeping the buoy upright artificially,
Yeah.
right? And so people continue to consume because they believe that it's either like mildly helpful or like it's not really indicative. It's also this thing like you wake up with these symptoms and you smoke, you feel better, you go out through your day, you're not necessarily going to vomit. The episode doesn't have to start right away. It's not a I smoked so I vomit. This is the misnomer. People think that everybody's just like taking a big rip off a joint and vomiting, which can happen. It's pretty uncommon, but it can. But that's not what we're dealing with. We're talking about a cycle. We're talking about something that comes in waves, lasts a certain period, goes away, comes back even harder in the future. It's something more like a relapse remitting MS episode, right? Something that's like coming through these cycles that have to do with your menstrual cycle. We know that about 40% of women said they noticed a correlation with their menstrual cycle. I might have just misquoted that number. Maybe edit that. Or just read the paper and you'll get the actual number. That's not the actual number.
Yes.
Uh, I'm all excited, but I cannot for the life of me remember what that number was.
That's
The
okay.
point is, the menstrual cycle stress was cited as the number one inducement of the condition. And
Wow.
so now it's like really starting to blur. Like alcohol is another trigger. Caffeine was mentioned as
Yeah.
a trigger. Greasy foods were mentioned as a trigger. What's going on here? And we don't know. I don't know. I want to figure it out. But what we do need to do is we need to make people aware this condition exists. It's preceded by a prodrome, a low level GI condition, and it sort of peaks, comes to a head on a hyperemetic episode. And we need to get people aware that this can happen to any of us for no particular reason. Overwhelmingly, people were smoking six or more times per day, but there was a small percentage of people who was just once a day, right?
Wow.
So there are sensitivities. Some of us are going to be more tolerant to regular consumption. Some of us will develop this faster, rather as opposed to for our vapors. Another big finding from this study is our vapors developed. Exclusive vapors. Those we asked, are you only vaping? Yes, this is the only dosage form I use. Developed this syndrome faster than those who smoked. Now, there were more smokers who had actually totally developed it, right? But the most commonly reported time window for smoking only was greater than 10 years of smoking only. And the vapors were like closer to 2 or 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Again, like distributed, that was the most common. There's some smokers who develop it fast, and there's some vapors who vape for 10 years or whatever. So it's not this cut and dry issue, but we're trying to piece together this puzzle, give people the tools to recognize this condition, and to stop the stigma around, nothing is perfect.
Yeah.
Cannabis is amazing. It's an amazing tool and it helps so many people and it saves lives. That's all true. And in some people, when used too frequently, when the product delivery system is incompatible with your genetics and all of a sudden things can get out of whack. And that doesn't mean cannabis isn't medicine. It doesn't mean cannabis is bad. It just means we need to treat it with a little more respect. And so we went through this phase of prohibition and marijuana's bad and Nancy Reagan and don't do drugs to like, oh, we can just smoke weed all day long, no matter what, no consequences. It's just a plant. And the truth is just in the middle. Just like so much of what we're dealing with in the freaking world right now, of politics and everything, the truth is in the middle.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that. So what can we give as advice for these patients that are experiencing it? Like what's the next step? Like I don't want to feel like this anymore, but
Yeah,
maybe I
that's
still want
tough.
to use cannabis. Like I mean, I know there's not one answer,
Yeah.
but
In like 2020, people were talking about using CBD to treat it. There's
Yeah.
not really a whole lot of evidence. Um, in part two of our survey, we'll start to delve into what people did to make themselves feel better, which medicines worked, what they did to their use patterns to change how they treated it. But in short, um, most people who reduced their use or totally quit got better to some degree. Even those who reduced their use, mostly their symptoms went away or reduced, right? So there's like a bit of a threshold going on. So my rule, my advice, and this is experiential, right? This is not like evidence-based, guidelines-based science. I say a 6 month tea break because we know some people can have symptoms a month or even 2 months out from stopping. So a 6 month tea break to let your buoy stand back up. Integrate exercise, integrate mindfulness practice, integrate healthy diet, probiotics, fruits and veg, the all the stuff that'll build that endocannabinoid system back up. And then if you're going to reintroduce cannabis, because I understand why someone would want to do that, especially if they don't want to be drinking or whatever. I get that. You just have to be aware of what we're dealing with. You have to be mindful of your consumption. And honestly, like I believe that many patients will be able to reintegrate. Now, if they go back to the same use, they will likely go back into the same cycle. And the scary part about the cycle is it tends to get worse, not better. Like, not like, oh, next episode will be like less. No, it's usually next episode is more. And we
Wow.
still don't know why that is. There are people who argue allergy, and understand that where they're coming from, just given what I just explained to you. We see the same thing with allergies. Um, and so I don't have all the answers to what's causing it. My buoy theory is a good explainer, but it's not necessarily what's happening on the cellular level.
Yeah.
And we still have to figure that out.
Nice. Yeah, that's amazing. I think, yeah, tea breaks are important. Tea breaks are really important.
And helpful. They'll keep your costs low. They'll keep your head a little bit clearer. And I'm not saying every patient has to take a tea break and there aren't medical conditions that you should, but if you're able, I think a tea break can be a tremendously useful tool to enhance the efficacy of your cannabis medicine. And tea breaks can also be leveraging other cannabinoids, right? Like really when you say a tea break, you're talking about THC. And
Mhm.
so if you can find a way to integrate CBG or CBD to help support that ECS without sort of punching it with the THC, because THC is a potent activator of that system, and it does so in a widespread manner. It doesn't just give you your beneficial effects, it gives you the side effects too. You're sleepy, you're fuzzy in your brain, you're dry mouth, all that stuff comes with it. So get pulling that away and allowing that body, all the systems to sort of come back to that balance that we were mentioning can be helpful. And because CBG or even low doses of THCV, these molecules do not slam that system in the same way, they can still be leveraged during those sort of, we'll call it a mindfulness break, not even a tolerant,
Yeah, I love
just like
that.
a break, a
Yeah.
change in your pattern, which can be really helpful to the body.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for being on this show. There's just so much you talked about, and I loved every single moment of it. And I know that our listeners will benefit from this as well. So please go find Dr. Codi Peterson. He's amazing, and we'll drop his information down below. Anything that you want to leave with the audience, like anything that's just coming up for you right now that you want to leave before we head out?
Cannabis, as much as we think of it as we're here, it's legal. That's not where we're at. You need to call your representative and tell them the vision that you have. You have to engage with your congressional representative. This cannot be executive ordered. This cannot be, if you feel like we need cannabis reform, then you need to talk to your representative. If you're like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this, great. Americans for Safe Access has all the tools already laid out for you to help you find your congressperson, a pre-written email, contact them. And we have a plan too. If you're like, I don't know what the solution is, we have our model legislation, the Medical Cannabis and Cannabinoid Act. We have a plan, but we need your support, and we need you to tell your congressperson that we need reform. Right now, medical cannabis patients are not reaching out to their representatives, and so the representatives thinks people are satisfied. And the only people they're hearing from right now are the hemp people who are upset, which is fine. I get why we're upset. Patients are at risk of losing access to full spectrum medicine, um, but we have to be proactive, not reactive. And the current hemp industry, for some people it's working, but this is not a guaranteed solution, right? What I believe and what we believe at Americans for Safe Access is it's time for medical cannabis reform at a national level. And patients deserve better than this patchwork of what's been going on so far.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Codi Peterson. It was a pleasure having you on the show. And yeah, excited to see this paper that's being released soon. It's so exciting.
Yeah,
I'll
I'll
make
send you the
sure.
link. Maybe it'll be in the
Yes.
description. Thank you. You're awesome.
Yeah, awesome. All right, take care. Thank you.